All right.
Yeah, well, so, and the only other practical thing as well, although this would be totally reasonable, and I don't think a waste of anyone's time to have on the recording also, not that there we go, we've started it, beautiful. I'll start mine too.
Mm-hmm.
Right, there we go. Is that I see these as collaborations, and so if this is not something that you want published, then we're in the same boat with respect to that. There's probably a more elegant way to say that, but it's kind of even that point itself is an interesting place for departure, actually.
Yeah.
Because in a conversation I think you had with Jordan Hall, I think it was with Jordan, you mentioned a really interesting distinction between vulnerability and exposure. That was something that came up as particularly alive in that conversation.
Yeah.
And that was something that immediately struck a chord with me. And I think it's extremely profound. And so I've been thinking about it quite a lot. And I'd actually really like to ask you about it. But given that I certainly want to hear your response and have that as part of the recording, I'd also like you as well, maybe perhaps first, just to briefly introduce yourself and how you feel most alive showing up in the world at the moment, so that our listeners can get a sense of a little bit of who you are.
Well, what's calling me most alive in this moment is wanting to know whether or not you got a haircut.
I did definitely get a haircut.
Good. Yeah. Okay. I thought
I'm covering a bit with the headphones, but
something is different, right? Is it natural like that?
Yeah, curly.
Yeah, is it curly? Am I seeing curls?
Yeah, there's curls there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's obviously been cut, but other than that, it's natural. Yeah, thank you. I had difficulties with my hair for many years. I don't think I had a care in the world until about the age of 11. And then between the age of 11 and 23 or 24 even, I could say I cared quite a lot, but did not know what the hell to do about that. I remember.
Talk about exposure, right?
Well, I should be able to manage this one now. I think that's the level of self-concern in that vain way, that if I couldn't presence that one, I still feel like already I feel a little bit of something there, but it's like, you know what, that's just how it is. I've figured it out now. I've got a product. I can get a haircut, put some headphones on. I used to wear a hat every day, basically.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. I would just remember I had a Jeep when I was in my early 20s. I loved it. And, I'm in Arizona, but I was also like just growing out my hair. Now I have like spiral golden locks, and I had no idea I had curly hair until I let it, because I'd never let it grown before. But man, it was a commitment to get through that in between period, because I would I'd be, like I'm in my early 20s, so I'm like a walking testosterone like machine, and like total, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'd get just the right combination of gel and stuff so it didn't look too weird. And then I go to my Jeep and I drive down the street and I look at it and I look like Bozo. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate that.
I like how you weren't aware you had curly hair. That seems an almost a ludicrous situation. How old were you when you discovered?
I was like in my early 20s, basically.
Yeah.
Wow. Maybe, but I had no idea for these perfect spiral curls. People used to call me Fabio.
Oh, there you go.
It's really strict.
Yeah, I see that.
I was kind of buffed out, and I was a bodybuilder when I was younger, and and so people just didn't quite know what to make for this one here, nor did I.
Yeah. Well, Fabio is quite a meme. I mean, that's why. So I don't even have an image of what he looked like, but even growing up, I remember somehow that man's name became somewhat synonymous with like ultimate stud of a man, but also with a hint of you're trying a bit too hard.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
You are, it's like, I think if we were to, I don't know much about him either.
Yeah.
But there was that sense of like, if you were to shape yourself in exactly the prototype of what men think women want, you'd probably Fabio. So you get like have some version of like what would look good and what is good, but you'd also imbued with it is all the mistakes that men inherently seem to think
Yeah.
about.
Right.
Right.
Right. God, attraction is so interesting.
Yeah.
What came to my mind there is smell,
Yeah.
because like there are people who at various times would not enjoy smelling me. But the strange thing is that there's a select few number of people who enjoy smelling just that kind of smell. And I'm like, what,
Yeah.
what is going on there?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea. But that we are, man, like I think the essence of a fetish, right, is just that, where it's almost like the opposite of allergic reaction, where it's like you're something benign that your body responds to as like by getting sick or defending itself. I think it's almost the opposite of like where you have like these peculiar things that become almost religiously profound for people.
Yeah. And I wonder about how difficult those early steps were into fully accepting that and realizing that as profound. Maybe the kind of resistance, both as felt in that kind of superego way from the social world,
right,
and then also maybe in an intimate relationship, and also coming somehow from within. I can sense myself reaching for a pattern that's maybe just before its time, but it does make me think of the exposure and vulnerability element just a little bit.
Yeah.
There's something about presencing your authenticity in a manner, in a setting where that is held and energetically transmuted and communicated back to you. That's fundamental to there being a sort of productive and appropriate growing relationship to the presencing of that authenticity. And of course, if it's not, might feel exposed, unsafe, more walls might come up. But I really would be very interested in hearing you reflect on that distinction between vulnerability and exposure, and maybe how you felt when that came to you recently in that conversation you had.
Well, this actually kind of speaks to, I mean, maybe this is an interest way into just introducing.
Sure.
So because a lot of this has just been by dwelling and doing, for all these years, which is, if you look at a lot of circling is about really being with the other, and a big part of it has to do with being seen and being heard and being felt, and then all of the complications and the beautiful things that come up with that I-thou connection, right? And so, I mean, it's just fascinating to watch what happens to somebody in different ways when they become aware that they're paid attention to. If you think about it, it's like it's just an interest. And I don't have anything figured out here. I think I found a mystery in that if I follow it all the way, I end up like in some interesting, almost religious kinds of places.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel truly that the path leads that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, what is it you think that spoke to you that had it stand out? Right? What's the thing that, like, because you knew, this is one of the things I'm curious. I'm always interested in those things where this is the big kind of phenomenological mystery to me, is how do I know, because you find out when something grips you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
how do you know without knowing what it is, right? Already to be gripped by it. And if you look at, like, if I look at my life, those things that have really seized me, right? I are the things that have ended up being those things in my life that have been the most self-revealing, character building, the things I'm the most proud of, and also was simply the process of finding out what it was that actually gripped me. It's like
Mm-hmm.
always like it has a horizon, something beyond the horizon
Mm-hmm.
that as I move towards it, it it gives more of a ground, but it doesn't ever release the beyond the horizon because you can't reach it. What is it that grips you? And I sense that something out of the horizon of all these kind of wild conversations I've been posting. That one, well, something got you there. I'm just curious, what do you think it was?
Well, I found many things interesting, many things gripping, and I know it to be true is what comes up to me,
Mm,
right?
mm,
It's like, yes,
mm-hmm,
and I know it to be true from multiple perspectives, and I know it to be true from many embodied experiences,
mm-hmm,
and I know it to be true in my future,
mm-hmm,
because I also I see it as a fundamental dynamic enabling of communication, transformation, and growth itself.
yeah.
So it's a fundamental cog, you
Mm,
know.
mm,
And what's interesting is that, and I really love the horizon metaphor you use. And how you make the point you just made and communicate that feeling and that inquiry.
mm,
It's something I've heard you communicate a few times before, and when we spoke to each other a month and a couple months ago now, it was something you presenced then, and it impacted me. And I
mm,
find that it is a really, really beautiful way to communicate something about the revelatory but never complete revelation of mystery and the transformation of ourselves. What also strikes me is that there's a sense in which we know
mm,
and a sense in which we don't know.
mm,
There's an awful lot in almost it. Maybe it depends on what kind of box we're looking to
mm,
wrap around that
mm,
initial sense of knowing,
yeah.
because I suppose in some sense that you're oriented towards the horizon at all
Mm-hmm,
is a critical part of the actual knowing of the directionality that's appropriate itself. So
yeah.
it's precisely as it should be. It is like, what else do we want other than meaningful orientation in
Right.
a more appropriate direction? We might want a few other things, but at some level,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing to be in touch with.
Yeah. Yes. And what is it? And it's like, the sense of it was, I really like what you pointed out, was this a kind of it, because it brings along the primordial sense of it, where
Mm-hmm.
in order for what is beyond the horizon to lay claim to me, right? Or to be claimed by it, or to claim it, I must already, in some sense, be in relationship to it.
Mm-hmm.
And that, whatever that is, right? That before I have before I can know about anything, there's already anything is available to me in some way that I find myself not necessarily having, but existing of. And that sense of primordiality, right,
Mm.
is where I think where what makes wonder, right? This wonder isn't that sense of just the fantastical, but it's more like wonder is that sense where, actually heard somebody really brilliantly put it like this. Been thinking about it ever since. In actually, I think you were there when I showed up. Um, um, that
The sense making wormhole. Yeah.
wormhole, which is really.
Yeah.
Somebody said, he talked about wonder was being in a room and then all of a sudden like leaning back and then realizing that that wall actually was a door and it just opened up. And it's like you haven't gone through the door yet, but just that feeling of things that were already there, right, that were ordinary, were concealed, that moment of unveiling of what is
Mm.
most near.
Mm. Mm. It's such a beautiful notion.
Hmm.
And that line of expression is something that I feel I've run through in slightly different words before.
Hmm.
And it's the kind of thing that's of a depth that would find many, many, many artistic representations.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's something that is,
Yeah.
it's I don't know, I don't think life is possible without that being the case, because we're always precisely where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if it's not within your, if there is not some capacity to discern
Mm.
immediately from where you are
Yeah.
in some way,
Yeah.
then there's like a deep discontinuity that I could only associate with a kind of death that maybe you don't come back from. And you know, there are deaths that we seemingly come back from, used metaphorically, you
Mm.
know, but then as well, I'm not really sure what death is, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. Well, it's like I was just having a moment, just kind of sinking into both what you were saying, but also like to the way that I experienced you in that moment, but also I've experienced throughout, is like how things really hit you.
Mm-hmm.
Like a sense of just like, ooh, like, and this kind of gets back to the sense what I think those moments for you, to me, those are moments of vulnerability, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where there's it seems to be a cultivated openness that it doesn't seem like you choose to have it in some decision oriented way, but there's a place that you sit that you're proactively open to be hit by what you don't know that you don't know yet, but you know enough to be oriented around it, to be struck by it. And I think I perceive that those moments of, and I think it comes across in a lot of the intensity of your expression and the way that you find out what you are saying a second after you say it. Like there's a risk there. And I would
Mm-hmm.
imagine like just the awareness of that this is being watched by other people, and that there's an orientation towards that risk that I would imagine that you are enacting a certain kind of proactive um, vulnerability, which I think is what makes something vulnerable, is that it's the distinction that we were talking about, is so people that don't know what we're talking about, is that the difference between exposure and vulnerability has to do with being a volunteer, right? It's volunteering
Mm.
to say the thing, right, that I know that if it isn't received or it's not understood, that I will in fact feel pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas exposure is this experience of where I think a lot of our traumas come from, right? Which is you're going along, you're in the schoolyard, and then, you know, somebody maliciously comes up behind you and like pulls your pants down and everybody looks at you.
Mm-hmm.
There's no agency in that. There's just like being at effect of being exposed.
Mm-hmm.
But now if you think about it, you're like, if you challenge yourself to like, I'm going to go out to that same place in front of those people and pull my pants down and tolerate that whole experience, you could imagine that being growthful, right? Almost, right? Could be.
Sure, sure.
Very
Yes.
different thing. So that's kind of like what we
Mm.
were like, that's the distinction they were talking about.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's a really beautiful distinction.
Mm.
And I also feel that what you say, your
Yeah.
observation about me is true as well.
Mm-hmm.
Although the choice as to whether or not I am doing it is an interesting one. I can remember, and still from time to time, although to be honest with you, quite rarely, enter environments where at least a certain degree of my expression is not appropriate. And I feel very much just what I'm, just what that leaves of me in relationship with that person, if that's the case. And I'm not just talking about, you know, having a chat with someone at the supermarket. It's not like I meet them and just want to drop into some existential not knowing, right? It's not like that at all. But you can have a laugh and you can just be more present still, and that's appropriate. And you can have just the little dance with just the little vulnerabilities, opening up the world of expression between the two of you. And maybe for just a moment, there's a little bit of a joyfulness there. I'm not talking about those instances of feeling like it's not appropriate for me to express, but when I suppose there's instances in which you you feel that there are areas where someone else might not be willing to go, and there's lots of those, and I'm not again saying that that's not appropriate, but there's something about when someone doesn't want to go somewhere in such a way that compromises the authentic development of that relationship. The experience of that is something I am attendant to, and I feel very much as though remaining in the bondage of that serves neither myself nor them. Now, context dependent, sometimes things play out over longer periods of time, not trying to be moralistic about this or in any way. But the point being, I can remember and feel in touch with what it is to not, in fact, step forward and speak on the tip of your tongue. Because there's actually I feel there's a deep knowing here that's before and between and after the words that, in fact, we're sharing right now. Right? So even though propositionally I'm not quite aware of what we will discuss, in some sense, I've already invested entirely voluntarily a certain dignity and trust in this relationship, and that automatically unlocks a place within me and you, because I sense it's reciprocal, that opens us, in fact, to some deep structural but qualitative realities of the way relationships can be. And oh, look, life is this weird complex thing that's also very simple, depending on just how it strikes you and where you're at and what it feels like to be there, you know. And there's this sense I get that some of the deepest wisdom and self-realization and wonder and so much of what we seek, in fact, maybe all of what we seek, is in some sense precisely is already there. It's just you're looking to put a box around what it is before, in fact, it presences itself over durations that extend beyond what your view of a box is capable of holding. But it shouldn't be boxed. It is just to be something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I was just aware of just as you're talking, just the sense of sinking in with you, right?
Mm.
It's a very distinctive sense of like, oh, we're in this together. And I think it was maybe I
Mm-hmm.
was already experiencing it, but not explicitly until when you said, and I sense this with you, right? Like in some level, I'm already chosen the direction that we're in, and
Mm.
I sense this with you. It's not like there's what I'm hearing is that there's a trust there, right? Like if you didn't sense it with me, like maybe you're sensing like maybe like you had a sense of like where I was actually like waiting to get you on something or something like that, right?
Sure.
There wouldn't be this trust, and I was feeling the relationship to just sinking into myself and a willingness to be vulnerable or a willingness to not know where we're going, to like let go of boxes. And when you said that, I was like, oh, I was already inside of that. When you said it, it just highlighted it for me.
Mm.
That kind of quality of, I think we can engender there, that there's a sense of that where we're doing something together, and we don't know where it's going, but there's you, I get this sense that I can kind of fumble fuck my way through something, right? And
Yeah.
then like realize I'm sitting with my pants down, I don't even know where we
Yeah.
are, and you're gonna be like, yeah, what you mean, right? Like, and
Yeah. Yeah.
like, there's a sense of, but it's not a trust like I know you or I know something about you. Like it's not like I have you pegged or I have guarantee of something, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's more like we're engaging. It's more of there's more of a sense of that there's a way that we're sharing. There's a way
Mm.
of
Mm-hmm.
orienting that we're both sharing that seems to engender a quality of enactment within my own nervous system that I can feel.
Mm.
And I think what it is just I think it's honoring this sense in which where vulnerability comes from. It's from the voluntary sense, which I think is courage.
Mm.
Now, one of the things I've noticed, and one of the things I've just seen over and over and over again, and experienced it in uh, in circling and teaching people how to
Mm.
circle and discovering what circling is that there's when somebody's being genuinely courageous, it's almost impossible to not be totally gripped and moved by that.
Mm.
Um, there's something about there's something about a shared courage
Mm.
that it's almost like you could just kind of take the most, you know, it's almost like to perceive I'm wondering about this as I'm saying it. It's like to perceive someone else having courage, I think, is a different kind of perception than perceiving what they're doing or what they have. It's almost like it's a perception that invokes a movedness that seems to come from the center of our being.
Mm.
Mhm.
Mm.
And perhaps that's the virtue in vulnerability is courage.
Mm.
Mhm.
Mm. And just what that opens up.
Yeah.
Yeah. The potential that enables
Mm.
to come forth, to be connected
Mhm.
somewhat, so that there's, because I suppose if we think about some line of expression, some improvisational dance, some dialogue, some addressing a room of people, really moving forward just bit by bit. There's a sense in which each step, when taken appropriately, if that timing is held, if it's landed,
Mm.
then well, there are steps that have come along the way, and there's, in fact, what has been created is something that holds.
Yeah.
So as new things are coming into being present, there is some kind of connectivity, security that enables everyone attendant to that expression to be to be there somehow, and to stand a little bit. There's a place for at least one of the feet to be grounded.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. The sense of what I think I heard you say is basically like, yeah, there is a sense in which already I'm not just expressing, but I'm already aware of the impact on the expression, right? So there's a sense of I think Jordan Hall put it like this. It's like his memory of when he was a kid and approaching a cat. You had to really feel into what does the cat want, and it animates in every part of the expression, right? That was connected to that part of the dialogue that I thought was just so profound. It just spun me around in the chairs when Viveki said, does that mean that like he said, is it possible the world is vulnerable? I was just not expecting that. But I think there's something so gorgeous around this, and I think it's what you're pointing to, which is we're talking about that we're talking about is our relationship in how we respond in our existence in every moment, right, to everybody, right, that we're in some kind of intimate an intimate relation. That it's not just me acting upon the world that I get to inframe and consume. Like my being, in that I even am comported towards a world and a horizon at all, is already a response to being as a whole in an I-thou kind of relationship. And so if we say that the world is vulnerable, that it's entrusting me, right, with being there, right, with my existence, right? So we're talking about something really intimate.
A deep involvement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cats don't fuck about. They don't fuck about when it comes to having a nice stroke. They don't. They like to come just to the edge of where your arm can reach.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They love that. They know the arm span of any human being just by looking for a second. They come. They just stay there. You have to reach. I'll meet you just reaching at the edge, right? You have to be real good at petting me for me to come any closer than that.
There's what it is to be a human being. All human beings, like try as they may, can't not admire the cats. Right.
I love cats.
Yeah.
I love cats.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing my mom's cat at Christmas. Her name's Mary Poppins.
All right on.
Yeah, she's a big cat.
Mary
she's a good cat.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it. There's something beautiful. It's beautifully meditative.
Yeah.
It's like it's aesthetic appreciation and gentleness.
Yeah.
And if you ain't aesthetically appreciating and being gentle, you're gonna find out about it very quickly.
Totally. Yeah. Completely.
Yeah. So it's a very deep notion, the consideration of the world as vulnerable. That's a very deep notion. And the intimacy point you made, that rings true. I feel I can begin to make sense of it from an intersubjective perspective. I can make sense of it from the relationality we experience with the world. From my understanding, John may use a term like the transjective to characterize the co-defining, interpenetrative, growing relationship, the relationship between the cognitive agent and the environment, which itself is imbuing everything, you know, in just a myriad ways, even within that particular mapping of agent to arena, because we ourselves are comprised of, you know, layers and layers of complex systems that are realizing themselves in relationship to habitat. And just what we tap into when we begin to quieten and listen to the world that we're in relationship with. Well, just what do we mean by the world fundamentally? What do we mean by the world? You know, I don't think it necessarily means just this, well, and of course, it doesn't just mean some almost 2D pictorial we might have about country here doing this to other country, right? And I'm a citizen of that country. It's something so much more fundamental in the very nature of how our identity itself transforms, and our experience of just what that is in relationship to what we care about. That's the level it takes me to begin to presence, to open into this kind of exploration.
Yeah, totally. I think I'm struck by the world as a, like, evoking the mystery of the world, right? Like that's I think one of the key points for me that I keep, if I just keep looking at what as I've gotten older, like what is the thing that's beyond the horizon? For me, what I've noticed is as I move towards the horizon, of course, your horizon is the thing you can't ever reach, right? Yet it's a horizon because it also speaks to beyond it, right? So there's this, but as you move towards it, you can kind of get this sense, and I'm sure, like, for anybody's listening, just look at your own life and look at those horizons that have called you forward, that, and then look at yourself in the mirror and see the character in the mirror, and then you start to realize, like, that character is very much shaped by those things that's calling us forth that we continually reveal. And to me, it seems like the measure of what's most real is that which keeps disclosing its infinity, its sense of mystery. And I think that's what spoke to me when you talked about, the world, like, on one level, the world is the only thing we've ever experienced. It's the most ordinary thing in the world. Yeah, when you think about the world, well, what do we mean when we say world? Right? Like, seems like if you try to point to it, well, where is the world? Like, thing we're always already in, somehow co-constitute at the same time. Like how I'm in it, reveals it in the character that it does, yet I was already in it already. There's so much mystery, bring it to light like that.
Yes. That's really beautifully expressed. Sometimes we can experience lostness in the mystery. I think perhaps this is why we don't always move into it.
Yeah.
And it strikes me, Guy, because I've listened to and watched, in fact, I've watched and listened to, I'd say, about between 7 and 10 conversations you've had, maybe maybe about 10 actually. There's a few on other podcasts as well, and yeah, maybe 10, 11. And in a very short space of time, we spoke for a few hours. Our first time. We've been speaking now, and I knew already and had sensed and am sensing that which we've already presenced, which was a certain, an unspoken and spoken agreement to be here on the cusp of vulnerability with each other.
Yeah.
And I've witnessed a really remarkable capacity that you have to enable that in others. And I think that the people I've heard you speak to are, in fact, exceptional people who are entering into that sort of covenant with you, obviously with their capacity to presence that. But I see a mastery in what you do, and I also feel that you have stepped into that mystery and know what it is to be on the pulse of it and also to be lost in it. And I feel it has to be that way. Otherwise you wouldn't be as able as you are to help stick the landing of where the relationship goes. In a way you've landed that many times awkwardly, probably, over the course of your life, to know that it's okay. Arse over tit in this particular instance is perfectly acceptable.
I pulled my own pants down in the schoolyard and still been victim of it.
And that's man, that's a deep thing. It's a profound thing.
Yeah.
And
thank you, Sis. Thank you for just sharing that. I really appreciate it a lot.
It's part of what I see is that there's something profound in the capacity you have that I wish for more people to have the opportunity to develop. And I don't mean I wish them to become you. I mean that I think you are doing something. In fact, there's something archetypal about it. There's something necessary with respect to how a relationship with the unknown in a relationship can transform in a way that's in touch with being held and seen. And my sense is that is a deep part of this kaleidoscope of conversation and tentative imagination, reimagination, construction of the frameworks wherein which we can participate, the habitats and frameworks and modalities wherein which we can collectively realize the set and the setting to enable continued transformation of people in a way that has them be held in community with each other and yet sovereign. It's really fundamental, and I see that, and it's why it's such a I feel so glad to be having this conversation with you right now.
I really felt like the way, and as I was listening to the way that you were feeling your way into what you were going to say, right, is I felt a very familiar sense of that way of feeling into it, because I'm right with you, right? Like I'm right with you, feeling into what is this that's happening. Like I'm learning a lot about myself from these conversations that I just wasn't anticipating, right? And it's not like, so this is what's interesting. And I heard this from Christopher. From Christopher, guy in the four-way conversation I had, right? Up in the left, my left corner.
Yes. A collaborator of John Vervaeke's a brilliant thinker in his own right
I
from
love
how
that.
I hear him express himself. Yeah.
I love that guy. I'm just like, he is weaving together. Like it's just so naturally lyrical in this technical way. It's just so, he's a unique being. And he said something in a podcast, I think, with the woman who she has a channel about quality, I think.
Yes. Yes. A
And he was,
quality existence.
yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Really good stuff that she's doing. But she had him on, and he was talking about like his venture into this world, right? That no one really knows what this world is, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
The internet or game beat,
Yeah.
like all these kinds of things. There's a awareness of this world. What is this? What's interesting is that there's a self-awareness to whatever it is, and it has something to do with technology. But it seems like we're in the middle of something.
Mm-hmm.
And there seems to be a common awareness that we don't know what it is, but we sense something. And that's part of the conversation. And so he jumps into this, and one of the things he said is like, somehow after these conversations, I'm feeling more of a sense of legitimacy to being a philosopher.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what that I want to have him on again and just talk about that. Like, because I think that there's a link between there's a link between these dialogoses, these conversations, right? Where there's a mutual tuning in something that also transcends, but yet informs the normativity that's going on between us. It shapes both of us, right? And so that he's starting to come to himself and see himself as a legitimate philosopher in such a way that I'm imagining it wasn't even like he was thinking he wasn't but now experience of it. And I think has something, it's very linked to being seen, being heard,
Mm-hmm.
engaging in these things that kind of brings in a kind of legitimacy, right? A kind of a sense of a presence of, and I would say that I'm actually, I'm finding a new level of that myself.
Yes.
Because my intention with doing this was like, it's because I was listening to podcasts and stuff like that, and I'm listening to the interviewers, and I was almost thinking, oh my God, there's so much more there we could do.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been saying that for years, so I was like, okay, I'm just going to start doing that, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I want to hit the sweet spot between like a normal conversation and circling, and I just wanted to do that, and so people on, but what's ended up happening is a whole other things being revealed.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
part of it too was this sense of like, I would have a conversation with somebody that, I remember this, there was a guy who is he's a Heideggerian, scholar. And we had this awesome conversation, and I was so excited to finally talk to somebody that's read more Heidegger than I have, because I haven't understood why the hell I've been like racking my brains on this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, Heidegger's got to sing to you, otherwise it's not fun, I reckon. He's got to sing to you, man.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we have this like awesome conversation, and then we get done. He's like, "Whoa, like this was something else," and probably a good thing I don't have a lot of these. This is it struck me because I think I had an assumption that somebody like him would be having conversations like this all the time, right? That like I just didn't know where they were, and that so, and I remember thinking to myself, I was like, wait a minute, don't you have these things all the time with people? But there's a different quality to it. And I've been hearing that a lot,
Mm,
right? And so it's had me go, well, what is my role here? I don't know what it is, but I can feel a new contours of myself being revealed in a new context that's having me start to update my own assumptions about myself and what I'm doing.
mm, mm,
I don't know exactly what that is. Um, but it's interesting. It's interesting, this phenomena of where something about the way that we relate and we interact together, that there can be conversations and interactions that shape things like my own identity is
mm,
formed, right? In this
mm,
participation. I'm kind of
mm,
watching a new level of it for me with myself.
mm,
Um,
mm. It's so interesting because I've been watching you do that, and I'm getting a look in on you doing it in a way that you don't even have on yourself.
uh-huh,
And you're saying that these are happening, like there's this new thing that's all of a sudden popped up,
yeah.
and it's in a way I have maybe the image I have of you is more of that new thing that you're becoming,
Hmm.
than or the old one, obviously, because I just
Yeah.
haven't seen that one.
Yeah.
And you're carrying along all of some of the old stuff as well.
Well,
So I feel I see quite a lot with the role you're playing and where you will play.
what's interesting is it's showing up in that more of the wonder sense. Because like on some level, I'm not like in the world of circling and the people that I connect with and so this is I mean, I've been looking at this and being shaped by it and wrestling with it all. And so there's a sense of where I understand my own shape in that world, but
Mm,
bringing that shape into another world, right,
mm-hmm,
has me
mm-hmm,
see my shape in a way it discloses. I haven't been
mm,
disclosed in the way that I'm being disclosed. Um,
mm,
well, other people are saying there's something that's going on there that's distinct and impacting me, and then I'm like, well, I think it's this thing that I've been doing, but I'm having
mm,
a relationship with it.
mm,
And
mm,
I feel that maybe, and this is one of the things that and especially for Vaki and I have just really been kind of racking our brains around this, right? Like kind of in a collaborative sense, it just seems to be going on its own, which is, I wonder, it's like here we are in this kind of like this postmodern, like, we're now in the last 10 years, it's become something weird if you actually go to church, right? And you believe, like, we're now in the first time since I've been alive, where being a Christian and having those beliefs are so outside of everyone's pre-thematic notions of what can be real or not.
mm,
Um, that it seems though that what can happen in a conversation, right? Uh, seems like it's almost like it's like a conversation is a place where people, it's one of the few places in the universe or in what our current understanding of reality is. Relationship seems to be this place where almost like we can still be reached by God seizures, right? We can still have like like responses and self-revealings and notions of transcendence and understandings and insights that um, that can bypass my beliefs and my assumptions about reality, right? That I can't deny the experience of what can happen there.
mm,
And where that seemed to be available in a religious setting before, right? It's less and less available. So, well, I have a feeling, I'm not sure, but like I have a feeling that we are circling around something here, um, that goes actually way back to the very beginning of Western history, which is, I think, what Socrates was on top, like was had its beat on, right? relationships, dialogos, getting closer to the mystery, like something that you can't put into words, but it's beyond, but we can be affected by it. Like, and in relationship seems to be a place where our pores are still open to something like that. That's starting to be recognized, and that starts to have an opening to all the other things that about the world and our relationship to it and spirituality. There's so much there, I think.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's beautifully articulated. And as you can probably tell, like, I'm in. You know, you know, I'm in a very serious way. And I've thought through a lot of how to tentatively, there's the train.
Yes.
There you go.
Well, you notice.
There you go.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. I notice there's an appropriate way to presence how the kernel of this budding transformation in relationship, dialectic, community, feeling process must be, you know, it is a circling into culture, a circling forth from culture deep within us already, of course, as well. I'm also very interested in sort of structural conversations about how I see something like what I feel must be present in our culture in a way that's linked to this, in order for us to in my feeling, move towards something more healthy, more authentic, more in touch with ourselves, the complexity around and within us, each other. And yes, it's something to circle into with care, partially because the preservation of the act of the not knowing or being with the not knowing with each other, nevertheless committed to the preservation of that which is continuous in the not knowing together, which all of a sudden begins to look a bit like some stable ground to stand on, you know, like that I mentioned before, with just stepping forward step by step, leaving breadcrumbs around us. Oh, we can actually kind of, we're sort of stable here a little bit for this time.
Yeah.
And so there's the actual realizing the importance of being in it and showing up with it, that is primary, like is actually the internal reality of anything we could talk about in terms of its extrinsic function, in terms of where it might sit in culture. But nevertheless, with this project over the last number of years, it's been something I've been tenderly moving towards. And I feel that things are coming closer in terms of the level of sort of a public proffering of that, a public offering of that, than I've previously felt appropriate to speak forth before. And that as well is part and parcel of where the conversation online is developing. And you know, an interlocking piece of all of this has always been and is always going to be how we relate to each other. I mean, it really is. That happens, at least as far as I'm concerned, at the moment, in time and space. So there's a certain amount of organization that has to be directed to create what's going to happen in time and space. It's like, you know, our Twitter interaction is essentially kind of just like a formal structural thing. It's like we're about to launch off somewhere. Let's see how fewer characters we can do that in. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
But without that, it wouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
That's just the communication between the two of us. The reality, of course, is that there are billions of people in the world, and the coordination thereof. And again, it doesn't have to be. It's it. The challenge is top-down coordination of that is not quite appropriate, right? So it's how to make an offer, and it's how to extend an invitation that is nothing more than, come as you feel, and I truly want you to come or not come in some sense the same way of your own integrity and choice.
Yeah.
Right. If you don't come like that, there's a sense in which I'm not quite sure that I want you to be there. But there's nothing really more to that other than the necessary beginnings for, well, in this case, a certain, not even a peer-to-peer developmental relationship, because, you might not know exactly why you're drawn, but hey, I feel like, yeah, I'm ready to come, and, and that's fine. And I maybe want to do more listening than talking. And that's beautiful. Like the contribution is as valuable.
Yeah.
But I feel it. I feel there is a deep need for the kind of reimagination of our space of socializing fundamentally, and from that space of socializing, like an essence of that, to be recognized as something to turn to, because if it's built correctly, it's built on an authentic presencing together. And so the world that I have been driven to see for a long time is one where that the powerful decisions, are made on the basis, or one is in a position of power if one has sufficiently held oneself accountable to authenticity with other people, right? In this deep, appreciative I thou way. Yeah. And I just thoroughly do not accept anything else. It cannot be. It violates me. It violates the people I care about. It actually violates the development of the people who would claim to be making decisions. There's just no. It's not in. There are modes of engaging with reality that are more conducive to loving development and the sovereign valuing of the possibility of life itself, in others, in yourself. And I am struck by the bereftness of that manifesting in the world, in positions of ostensible, power, ostensible positions of authority, people looking at them. It angers me a lot, really.
Right. To stand, there's the part, I think, what I, as you're talking about, when you said I will not accept, there's like a gathering sense I got, right? In that moment of like where, and this is the other side of authenticity, right? Right, on one level, there is this deep sense of, I think is like a lot of different words you can use for it, but there is this sense of kind of like Eckhart talks about Gelassenheit, right? This kind of profound letting be, letting being, a letting a be, right? That allows being to kind of gather up in its unconcealing concealment, right? Has this kind of sage openness to it. And yet, and at the same time, there's also a stand, right? That's, what I heard you say is like, yeah, there's something, in the infinite perspectives and the infinite things I can pay attention to. There seems like that there is a place that if I bring my attention there And when you get down to it, it's kind of like it's not based on certainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's based on something else. I don't know exactly what that is. I would imagine it's that relationship between the Gelassenheit and the breakthrough that 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 has one get a wise feel for where reality is, where the reality may be, that let me know whether or not I'm on or I'm off, right? That kind of disclosure. But there is this kind of quality where it's like there is a stand there. There is like, and the stand is, it allows one to disambiguate in the face of infinite ambiguity, right? That there's this feeling that as you
we have to close to open, right? There are closures to be made, and that is very, very interesting, given just how much openness calls for, just how much it requires. That there are closures still is a God, it's difficult. And this might be, you mentioned postmodernism earlier, right? There's a sense there with like, oh, we've got to be as open as possible. But truly there is deeply not a presencing of the groundless ground we can stand on in this conception. There is a deep bereftness in the substructure of that way of viewing the world.
Yeah.
Right. There's no capacity to close. There's no capacity to stand even for a moment, because the metaphysics to understand that closure is something that is, it's like, oh no, that's fixed and eternal. If I close something, it's like it doesn't have, I don't think it has the kind of the process relationality that we're describing. It doesn't have built in the sovereign participation in transformation. It doesn't have a notion of an identity that we share that transforms.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a quality of and this is something I got to say, we are really, I would say it's, and I'm actually learning about this a lot in my being married, which is, it's so interesting for me to be married, and I keep feeling deeply schooled by it. And a lot of the reasons I'm schooled by it is that on one level, marriage, like, people get married all the time. People have been getting married all the time. But I kind of went into it like thinking about like, well, this is kind of a formality, right? Like, but actually as I stepped into it, yes, it is a formality. It's one that forms. And I'm watching it. I'm watching myself going like, wow, I'm really in service to something that I'm inside of, that has a felt sense of a history to it, that's present, that organizes my perceptions. And there's and I just get this sense of that there's a history, like there's a presence of a deep structural history being disclosed. And I being born in the age that I am, right, like is kind of like a classic secular humanist. I've always been suspect of social norms of any kind, like I just almost habitually just. And I'm now kind of seeing the sense of like, whoa, wait a minute here. There is like that something has lasted for generation after generation after generation already. If you really see that it survived through all of this, you really look at that, it wages a deep respect in my experience, that I'm waking up to more and more and more. And so authenticity, and as we talk about authenticity, I think that I had this idea without even reflecting on it, that authenticity was something like uniqueness, or kind of doing your own thing, or dancing to the beat of a different drummer. But I'm now starting to think it's actually something distinctly different. And I think I've thought about this word like author, right? Like And I get this sense that it's like, it's more like this. Authenticity is more like this. It's more like picking up the concerns that you were born, the inherited concerns that you were born into, and the roles that you can't not be in, right? What becomes intelligible to do, right, is given into this like womb of intelligibility that you're in. And it's more of a sense of like, you pick up the book and you read it so deeply, right? All the procedures and the enactments, and you do it so deeply that at some point you've read it so thoroughly that the next page you turn, you realize that you're writing the next paragraph. You're writing it as you go. But that whole period of like deeply being of and in the world and taking on those concerns and being responsible and like humbly learning, the authorship is the surrender into that fully and really making it your own. And in a certain sense, the authoring of the next page is really like you take the pen from all the previous authors, and you got to earn that, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot in what you said. Have to earn it. Could you say more on this notion of earning?
Yeah. Well, I think it's like one of the things that had it kind of emerge for me in the moment was just this. You brought up like the postmodernists, and there's all kinds of gradations in postmod. So like it's already an overgeneralization, but like, the kind of, it's a weird arrogance that I can relate to, right? I'm kind of it in a certain way, right? Which is basically, look, there's no ground. All there is inherited stories that the whole thing, right? The whole thing. And one of the things they don't notice is that, okay, so there's no ground. Therefore, everything is a dun, 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 and they just put themselves in another ideology, another kind of like can't escape, right? In a certain sense.
We're still here. We still end up here.
Yep. Totally.
So what are you going to do? That's precisely the thing. That's always the thing with it.
We're with each other. And so we're with each other. And I think this is part kind of brings back to the relationship. One of the things about technology, right, is, and I think this is why circling has emerged, right, in a certain way. Even like 20, 30 years ago, if it would have been just made no sense to go like, oh, okay, we're going to create a practice on like basically the fundamental unit of relationship. Let's do it on purpose. That wouldn't have made sense until recently. And I've been coming to think about like, well, why is a moment at Burning Man with my friends that opened up to this profound thing, how did it go from that to all around the world, despite, right, the pathetic characters that we're doing it, right? It wasn't like, it wasn't.
I don't know about that, but I'll accept it in jest, but I don't know.
It wasn't through like know-how and good business skills. It wasn't through marketing,
sure,
right? It
sure.
emerged on its own. It's like, what is it responding to? And I'm not sure, but at first I was like, well, maybe it's the methodology, right? But I'm like, it takes a lot of education to look at what we're doing and distinguish it from any other human potential movement thing. Like, and then I started to really look at social media. And I think that there has been something that's been so profound and impactful that's kind of, that I don't hear talked about that much, which is, and I think it started at first with the answering machine, right? Where you go back in time, there was a point where there was no answering machine. And
Mm.
so when you had to exchange information, you always had to call the person and they had to answer the phone. And you had to have this weird, ambiguously filled thing called talking have to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
For there to be like an information exchange, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then the first place it came up was the answering machine, where all of a sudden I can actually kind of relay information without having to go through the relationship. We can connect without having to relate.
Mm.
Now you fast forward and you look at all the multiple ways in which we can connect and exchange information without having the, as Levinas would say, the phenomenological basis of all morality and all ethics being the encounter with the other, the ethical obligation, the phenomenological sense of nervousness you feel when you look at another's face, and why you can't be like, why when you don't have to deal with that, you have road rage and you can do it without feeling guilt about it, right? Is because
Mm.
something that happens in the encounter that is you can't get below. And Levinas would say that if you didn't have that fundamental experience of a sense of responsibility
Mm.
in the face of the other, right?
Mm.
Ethics wouldn't make any sense unless there was that primordial,
Mm.
right, relationship. And now, if you make it an option all of a sudden to either have that or to send a text, right? You now have a choice that we've never had before, right? And whenever you change the structure of communication, like if you like read, was it McLuhan talks about this. He's like,
Mm.
it's like whenever you just change the structure of communication, you change everyone's identity, you change the world.
Mm.
And so I have a feeling that in a certain sense, one of the reasons why circling, the thing that is unique about circling is that it's like, you could say it isolates the fundamental unit of relationship that underlies all of the relationships and makes it a yoga. Well, because it's uncomfortable to do that, right? My nervous system
Mm.
is going to gravitate towards, just like machines did after the Industrial Revolution, brought everything in front of us. We didn't have to move, right? Then before that, there was no such thing called physical fitness, right?
Mm.
Because life was hard enough. It involved lots of movement. And I think that there's something similar going on with relationship. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, definitely,
so,
definitely.
so there's that authentic attunement of like finding the right, because that's a lot of what goes on in interactions on just the social dance part.
Mm.
Is we're
Mm.
constantly like, if what I say kind of hurts you on some level, right? Or it's like if you get this immediate feedback that doesn't really, there's no rule book that lays all that out, but it's a phenomenological enactment of a dance, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we don't have
Mm-hmm.
to do a lot of anymore because we can just text each other. But I think we start to lose our humanity. Um,
Mm. Mm. I
it's interesting,
mean, wow.
these conversations. Yeah, those are some of the thoughts I've been having over the last couple of years about this stuff.
Yeah, beautiful thoughts. When you mentioned the word nervousness, it immediately brought to mind the nervous system, obviously,
Yeah,
and how important it is to co-regulate nervous systems in a
yeah,
dance,
yeah,
and it's with a text message, it's and we're figuring out new emojis and gifs and stuff like that, but in many respects it's taken pretty blunt instruments
hmm.
to regulate what is an incredibly complex potential art form and dance. Yet, and here's interesting, right, there's so many places to go. Let me check my phone because I sense, okay, it's 10:01, and so we have a my time, which means we probably need to wrap up within about 20 minutes or so. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Oh, so interesting. There are what would be, well, okay. So this isn't where came up to me to explore with you until right until the end of your expression there. And that's this, which is, we know that millennials, and I think even moreover, the Gen Z, which is the generation to come after the millennials, are absolutely immersed in developing their relational sense of self and sense of other, using platforms and this kind of technological communication that removes key elements of what we've, for the entire history of humanity, used to regulate our nervous systems, which was other nervous systems in space, in proximity.
Yeah.
And there are different ways of thinking about this that I've heard. I've heard some very optimistic takes, which are relevant to bring into the picture, because we must, I think, be open to the sort of already this already relationship we have with technology, and just how much the incentives of the system that we're a part of are, the car is already running, and while we may consider slowing elements of it down, even if that were the case, reimagining how we consider growth in areas of development and awareness, perhaps, rather than a certain kind of materialistic, ordinary economic growth. Even if we wanted to have that conversation, which is a very interesting conversation to have, the car is still going to take a certain amount of time to slow down. And if it just stopped suddenly, that would be a real bloody problem. So the car is going to be moving somewhere. And so there's a sense in which it is interesting to consider what new modes of communication and relationship are made possible by these kind of platforms, while at the same time looking to establish a place where we may remember this other, in my sense, still deeper kind. Just because we're so, I mean, the whole attitude we've taken to understanding the world and our bodies has, for the most part, always been through certain boxes that have obscured a kind of a different take. And there's so much mystery, you know, and it's not appropriate to box that away and not attend to it and not reimagine it again, and continue to, as of course many people are. But there's something, but I also don't, I mean, I guess what I'm searching for here is what we might say of the because I've heard people present something like, oh, there could be, you know, an affordance of a different kind of language, that maybe actually we can take a certain kind of state and perhaps use a certain kind of emoji or a GIF to capture that in such a way that communicates a great amount of information and has that embedded in a way that's really fast and adaptive. And in many respects, we are establishing, so really we have to, so if that's the case, we actually want to, the memes established in that must be continuous with what it is to show up in person as well.
Right.
So while it's appropriate to create new icons of communication, these we must be enabling a continuousness of our relationship to that up and down the full stack of relational modalities.
Yes.
And yeah, that's something that came to me there. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a sense in which, you know, I think you brought up a good point, which is, you know, like, as much as we could look at this and be horrified, right, appropriately. There's a way in which there's a historical movement, right, that we just can't piss in the wind of it, right? We can't.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the things about some of the dialogue around climate change and stuff like that. Like, I'm not an expert in any of that, and but there is this sense in which I notice we're. I don't think that we have history in our hands. I don't think we produced history, and I don't think we have it in our hands as an object, right?
Mm.
And I think that there was we're of it, right? We're historical, like through and through. We already are before we have anything to say about it. There's something
Mm.
happening, and like, so in so many ways,
Yes.
like in so many ways, it's like we'll have the greatest intention, and like our very way of addressing the problem can be the problem itself, right? And not even know it, and have us be blind to it. There's something else happening, right? Um, and I think that there's something about not like there's something about that not it's not like I'm going to ever figure out how to do a different history. I think it's
Mm.
more like there's a movement that commands deep respect, in which I'm a little ant, right, in a tree that's trying to like even doesn't even
Mm.
know to what degree it's on a tree, right? Um,
Mm.
and be just really aware of those of just that humility, which is strangely concealed in our times. And this is what Heidegger would call. He would say this is like where our
Mm.
primordial sense of being is a kind of, we see it technologically, right, in the sense of that being is no longer an object over against a subject. It's now all a standing reserve, where we seek to optimize and extract the energy from it. We no longer see the Rhine. We see power plants,
Mm.
right? We see everything as a resource to extract from and to order in ever evolving.
Mm.
And so what that does technologically, and if you can kind of see it in anything technological, the being of technology collapses distances, right? So like the more
Mm.
technological the phone is, the faster it is. And you can,
Mm.
there's, I don't know why, no one can really say why we need faster phones. Like at this point, there's a momentum going on, right? It's a movement of being. And I think what Heidegger would say is like, it's more like, he would say something like, you can't move against it, but you can seek to develop it beyond itself. And I heard that sensibility,
That
right?
is beautiful.
Yeah, I heard that sensibility in that, like,
Mm.
and I wonder, I have no idea, but I wonder if part of what's happening in these conversations, right, and that people are now having conversations about these conversations, is that technology actually has brought together a platform that enables something very untechnological called a meandering conversation, right? In which we can share, and that beams out to me, anyways,
Mm.
something very distinct from a lot of the other things that technology does, which is just create more technology. Here,
Mm.
you and I can talk.
Mm.
There's no way we would have ever have talked before, but we're able
Mm.
to unite and then stand on the platform that this creates, in such that we can engage in something that's not collapsing distances, right?
Mm. 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 Yeah, it's interesting that you use the metaphor of standing on the platform,
Mm-hmm.
almost as though then to call across and engage in a certain kind of relationality enabled by the platform. There's a dimensionality to that. That's a 3D image, and it's also something taking place over time. Yeah, it's very interesting. Guy, you've I'm so grateful for this conversation. And I have to yeah, the first artificial thing in it is me catering to this time and space thing, because
yeah,
because if I, obviously there's the river continues meandering, and
doesn't it?
but I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for this dialogue, and it feels absolutely appropriate for me to share it.
Great. Me too.
Is that how you? Yeah. So that's beautiful. And look, in ways that I think need not articulate now, I'm looking forward to the future and the opportunities for collaboration I hope that has in store. Yeah. And so I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, weekend, and onwards. I'll be watching on and enjoying. So thank you. And
also,
I look forward.
On another practical note, like
sure.
In I think March is when I start the next training program in the thing that I do, circling. So like I'll give you a link for people to find that if they want to pursue.
Yes,
that.
Beautiful. Right. Yeah. So yeah, I'll be posting this obviously to the Voice Club YouTube channel and the podcast. And so just let me know, send me a link in Twitter or Facebook. We have each other on Facebook now. What links you would like me to post, and I'll attach them on. So fantastic. Yeah, awesome.
You want me to upload this to my channel too, or
if that's something you're interested to do, then that's interesting.
Totally.
Yeah. Sure. Totally. I'm happy to have it out there on both. I've recorded myself with a camera here as well. So I'm actually going to change the image of me on here to that. But that doesn't need to, you can just go ahead and publish the one we've recorded here. Okay, cool. So the audio you're hearing from me is coming out of these headphones rather than this microphone. So the podcast version, I'll be putting this in so that it's a better listening experience. But yeah, absolutely.
Also, next time, let's talk. I want to talk about your live events, your live event that you do. I'm looking forward to hearing about that at some point.
Yes, absolutely. And but that's precisely what I'd love to collaborate on. And of course, we already are. We already are. Yeah. I'm deeply being informed by all of this, and it's really enabling of creating a certain presence, knowing that not only are we there in the room with each other, but there are people around the world who feel the importance and the relevance of similar things. And it's that kind of communication across these micro communities that I think is part and parcel of this whole endeavor that we're on. So yeah, beautiful. All right.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Guy. Thank you. All right, mate. I'll talk to you soon, I hope. Have a beautiful day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.